It was late. Later than I should have been there, honestly. I sat at my desk, staring at the clock. The kind of tired where you've passed the point of going home and just let the work swallow you. The funeral home was always quiet, but at night, the silence felt like it was waiting for something. Even my breathing felt too loud. I leaned back in my chair, debating whether I had one more task left in me for the night, or if it was time to lock up. Then I heard it. A knock at the front door, sharp but loud enough to make me sit up straight. That sound didn't belong here at this hour. No one knocks after dark unless there's bad news. And the kind of bad news that comes here? I wasn't in the mood. I stayed seated for a second, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it, but then it came again, harder. 3 quick knocks that seemed to tighten the space around me. I got up, grabbing my keys on instinct, even though I didn't need them for the door. "Hang on," I called out, my voice barely breaking the quiet. My shoes scuffed softly on the floor as I walked down the hall. I stopped at the door, hesitating for just a second before opening it. 3 figures stood under the dim glow of the porch light. A man, a woman, and a teenage boy, all dressed in black, not funeral black, but the kind that seemed too clean, too perfect. The man was tall, wiry, holding a folder in one hand like he'd practiced exactly how to give it to me. His face was calm, but there was a stiffness to it, like it was rehearsed. The woman, shorter, with hollow eyes that didn't meet mine, stood just behind him. She looked like she'd been crying, but there were no tears, just the red-rimmed glaze that came after. The boy couldn't have been older than 15, maybe 16. He stood there clutching a box, his head tilted down, though I felt his eyes on me, watching. "We need you to take care of her," the man said, stepping forward. His voice was calm, flat, but not warm. It wasn't pleading or desperate, just practiced. I took the folder and opened it. The paperwork looked normal enough. Name, birth date, death date. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. I flipped through it quickly, glancing at the bottom for any signatures or irregularities, and that's when I saw the handwritten note. It was scrawled in a sharp, angular handwriting that looked more like it had been carved into the page. "Must be embalmed by candlelight. Hands must not be moved. Do not disturb any personal effects." I frowned and looked up at him. "What's this about?" "It's important to the family," he said. "Please, tonight." "It's unusual," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Why candlelight? Is this some kind of—" I stopped myself before saying ritual. The word didn't feel safe here. The man just stared at me. "It has to be tonight, and it has to be by candlelight." Behind him, the boy shifted uncomfortably. The box of candles pressed against his chest like a lifeline. The woman hadn't moved. She was staring at the ground, her face blank. Her lips parted slightly, like she was trying to say something but couldn't. I glanced past them, noticing the car parked by the curb. It was an old funeral car, not modern or polished, but one of those boxy ones from decades ago. The paint was faded black, with scuffs along the edges. I thought I saw the shape of curtains in the back windows, but they looked too dark to be sure. I exhaled slowly, closing the folder. "All right," I said. "Bring her in." The boy shuffled forward, and together, they carried her inside on a stretcher. She was wrapped in a heavy blanket, her outline barely visible. They placed her gently on the embalming table in the prep room, where the light felt stark and cold. The woman still hadn't spoken, but she was clutching the man's sleeve now, her fingers digging into the fabric like she couldn't let go. "Do I need to know anything else?" I asked. The atmosphere felt off with her body in the room. The man turned back to me, his face still calm, but his eyes harder now. "Follow the instructions," he said. "Exactly." The boy lingered for a moment, watching me like he wanted to say something. His lips twitched, but no words came. The man grabbed his arm and gently pulled him toward the door. They left without another word. And that's when it happened. I turned to look at the radio. The timing felt off, like the whole building had stalled for a moment. Shaking it off, I glanced at her body. The blanket over her looked too exact, stretched too precisely across her frame. I didn't want to admit it, but my skin prickled at the thought of what might be underneath. The man's final words repeated in my head. Follow the instructions, exactly. I felt like I'd just signed up for something I didn't understand. I don't usually follow instructions that feel this off, but there I was, standing in the prep room with their damn candles lined up on the counter, wondering what the hell I just agreed to. The candles were tall and plain, the kind you'd see at a cheap vigil. They smelled faintly of wax and dust, nothing special. But something about the ritual of lighting them, of relying on their flickering, uneven glow instead of the fluorescent overhead lights, felt wrong. Still, I followed their request. I struck the first match, letting the flame dance on the wick until it caught, and placed the candle on the far corner of the table. One by one, the rest followed, their glow casting shadows across the room. Those shadows felt alive, the way they stretched and shrank against the walls with every flicker. By the time I finished, the room didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt smaller, stranger. The usual sounds of the prep room, the hum of the ventilation, the faint buzz of the radio, were swallowed by the dim light. I kept glancing at the body. She was still wrapped in the blanket, perfectly still, perfectly quiet. But the instruction, those stupid instructions, they kept scratching at my brain. Do not disturb any personal effects. Do not move the hands. I'd read the line over and over before they left. What could possibly happen if I didn't? I leaned over the body, gently pulling back the blanket until her face was exposed. She was older, maybe late 60s, with smooth, pale skin that didn't look quite real. Her lips were parted slightly, and her expression, God, her expression, was what stopped me. It wasn't peace. People always say the dead look peaceful. But that wasn't what this was. It was like she was in on a secret I wasn't. Like she knew something terrible was about to happen. But she didn't have to worry about it anymore. I shook it off and kept going. The next step was removing the blanket completely. I worked carefully, loosening the folds until her arms came into view. Her hands were clasped together, fingers interlocked over a small, dark piece of fabric. I paused. The instructions had been clear. Do not move the hands. But why? What were they afraid of? I leaned closer, squinting at the fabric. It looked like a scarf, maybe, but it was too small, too thin. It had an oily texture that caught the light in strange ways. I reached out, my fingers hovering over hers, but then I heard something. I stood still. My hand jerked back instinctively, and I stumbled a step away from the table. No, I whispered, my voice breaking the quiet. That's not possible. Air escaping from the lungs. That's what I told myself. It happens sometimes, right? A natural release. Nothing to panic about. But my chest felt tight and uneasy as I stared at her face. Her lips were parted the same way, slightly open, but now they looked different. Wrong. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it. That small sound had made her seem alive. I stood there for a minute, my feet refusing to move. My brain kept trying to rationalize, to push me forward. It's just the air, I told myself again. It's just the air. Finally, I swallowed hard and forced myself to lean back over the table. My hands trembled as I finished removing the blanket. careful not to touch her hands or the fabric they clutched. The rest of her body was stiff, her skin pale but intact. No signs of decay. But then I saw the faintest bruise wrapped around her wrist. Just a shadow, really, but it stood out against the whiteness of her skin. It wasn't in the paperwork. There was nothing about an injury or a struggle. I reached for her arm to get a closer look, but stopped myself. I wasn't supposed to disturb anything. They'd made that perfectly clear. Instead, I stared at the bruise, trying to convince myself it wasn't important. It didn't matter. She was gone, and none of this mattered. But the tightness in my chest told me otherwise. I glanced at the candles, their flames flickering slightly, casting uneven light across her face. My gaze shifted back to her lips, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I never thought I'd feel in this line of work. Fear. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at her face. Long enough for the candles to burn lower, the shadows shifting again, stretching across the room like something alive. I didn't like it. The room felt too still, too watchful, as though I wasn't as alone as I thought. I forced myself to move, to keep going. Standing there doing nothing wasn't going to make this any easier. I started the embalming process, carefully setting up my tools, trying to focus on the familiar rhythm. But the more I worked, the more I couldn't push away the feeling that something was wrong, off. It was little things. The way her skin felt, too pliable, too soft, for someone who'd supposedly been dead long enough to need embalming. I told myself it was the lighting, the shadows playing tricks on me. But then, as I lifted her arm slightly, her fingers twitched. Not much. Just the smallest jerk, like a reflex. My heart jumped out of my chest. I stared at her hand, watching, waiting for it to move again, but it didn't. Muscle spasms, I muttered under my breath, though my voice sounded weak even to me. It happens. I've seen it before. The body releases tension. The muscles contract. There's nothing supernatural about it. And yet I couldn't convince myself to touch her again. I took a step back, rubbing my hands against my thighs, trying to steady myself. My eyes flicked to her face, and for a moment, I thought her lips had shifted. Just slightly. I blinked, and they were the same as before. I needed to pull it together. I turned away, heading to the counter to grab something, anything, to busy my hands. That's when I noticed her coat. It was folded neatly in the corner of the room, untouched since they'd brought her in. But now, something about it caught my eye. The inner lining was slightly bunched, like something had been tucked away inside. My hands moved before my brain could stop them. I reached for the coat, pulling it open, and felt my fingers close around a thin, stiff piece of paper. A photograph. I held it up to the candlelight, squinting at the image. It was old, faded, with the colors bleeding into each other like watermarks. The woman was in it, standing in the center, wearing the same dress she was now. But what made my stomach twist were the people around her. They were identical. The same face, the same expression, the same blank, lifeless stare. They weren't twins, they weren't siblings. It was as though the same person had been copied and pasted over and over, their faces perfectly aligned. And yet one of them wasn't staring at the camera. In the corner, one figure stood slightly apart, their head tilted just enough to meet the lens. Their expression wasn't blank like the others. It was focused, sharp, like they were looking right at me. I lowered the photograph, my hands uneasy, and set it down on the counter. "No," I said quietly. "Nope, not doing this." I took a step back, then another, putting as much distance between myself and that photo as I could. And then I heard a noise from the table. I froze, with every hair on my neck standing straight. The sound wasn't loud, but in the silence of the room, it might as well have been a scream. I turned slowly, my eyes locking on her body. She was exactly as I'd left her, or at least I thought she was. Her hands still clutched the fabric. Her face still wore that maddeningly serene expression. But the candles flickered violently now, and for a split second, I could have sworn her chest rose. I swallowed hard, shaking my head. "It's nothing," I muttered, trying to convince myself. "It's nothing." But I didn't believe it. I couldn't keep going. Not after that creak. Not after the way her fingers had twitched or how her skin felt too alive under my gloves. The photograph kept creeping back into my mind, too. The duplicated faces, the one figure staring directly at me. Every instinct told me to stop, to leave the room and lock the door behind me. But I didn't. I couldn't. I stood there, gripping the edge of the embalming table, staring down at her face. Her lips were still slightly parted, frozen in that strange, serene smile. The candlelight flickered again, stretching shadows across her features, making her look like she might start breathing at any second. I leaned closer, squinting, just to convince myself she was really, truly still. That's when it happened. Her eyes opened. Not all the way, just a sliver, but it was enough to make my breath catch in my throat. For a long second they stayed like that, barely open, her gaze glassy and unfocused. Then, without warning, a tear rolled down her cheek. A single, slow tear. I stumbled back, nearly knocking over my tray of tools. My heart was pounding so hard, and goosebumps were all over my skin. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, no, no." This wasn't normal. None of this was normal. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, pulling it out of my pocket. I didn't want to believe what I'd just seen, but my gut wouldn't let me ignore it anymore. This wasn't just a mistake in the paperwork. It wasn't just some strange family ritual. This woman wasn't dead. I dialed 911, my thumbs slipping against the screen as I tried to steady my breathing. The call connected after the first ring. 911, what's your emergency? I think someone's alive. There's a body here. It's not dead. She moved, and her eyes. Sir, calm down. Can you confirm the address? I gave them the details, pacing back and forth in the room. My eyes kept darting back to the table, half expecting her to sit up, but she didn't move again. Her eyes stayed half closed, her tears still glistening on her cheek in the flickering candlelight. The operator assured me an officer was on the way, and I hung up, sinking into the chair by the counter. My head was spinning. What was I supposed to do now? Check her pulse? Try to wake her up? The idea made me sick. I didn't get a chance to decide. A knock at the front door came, loud and forceful. It echoed through the funeral home, snapping me out of my thoughts. I shot up from the chair, my heart racing again. The cops? They couldn't have arrived that quickly. I hesitated for a moment, then made my way to the door, glancing at the clock as I passed the hallway. It had only been 5 minutes since I'd made the call. When I opened the door, it wasn't the police. It was them. The man, the woman, and the boy. Their faces were eerily calm, the same way they'd been earlier, but now there was something different in their eyes. Something colder. "We need to take her," the man said, his voice low and firm. He didn't ask, didn't explain. He just stepped forward, expecting me to move aside. "What?" I said, my voice shaky. "You can't. She's alive. I called the police." His expression didn't change. "You shouldn't have done that," he said, almost like he was scolding me. The boy shifted nervously, his hands twitching at his sides. The woman still hadn't said a word. "You can't take her," I said, blocking the doorway. My fear was giving way to anger now. The cops will be here any minute and... The man's calm exterior cracked just for a second. His jaw clenched, his voice dropping lower. "We'll handle this. Step aside." I stood my ground, but the boy's voice stopped me cold. "Did you hear her?" he asked quietly, his eyes wide and haunted. "What?" I said, my breath catching. The boy's gaze flicked past me, toward the prep room. His voice trembled. "Did you hear her crying?" The boy's words stopped me cold. Crying? The word echoed in my mind like a warning I didn't want to understand. I turned to glance down the hallway toward the prep room, but all I could see was the faint, flickering glow of the candles spilling out into the corridor. The shadows on the walls shifted, alive in a way they shouldn't have been. I stepped back, shaking my head. "You're not taking her. I don't know what this is, but you're not..." The man stepped forward, his presence filling the doorway. His face was calm, too calm, and it scared me more than if he'd been shouting. "She's not yours to worry about," he said. "You've done enough. Step aside." I glanced at the boy, whose wide eyes darted toward the prep room again. His mouth opened, as though he wanted to say something, but his father's sharp glance silenced him. The woman stayed where she was, silent and still, her gaze fixed on the ground. "No," I said, my voice firmer now. "I called the cops. They'll be here any minute. And if you think..." "You made a mistake," the man interrupted. His tone as smooth and cold as steel. "It's better for everyone if you let us take her now." I didn't move. I was scared, my breath shallow, but I stood my ground. "She's alive," I said. "I saw her. She's breathing in her eyes." "You don't understand," the man said. "And you don't need to." Before I could respond, the woman brushed past him and walked toward the prep room. Her movements were stiff, mechanical, like she wasn't in control of her own body. She didn't look at me as she passed. Her hands trembled as she reached the table and leaned over the body, her face inches from the woman's pale, still face. "Hey!" I shouted, moving to follow her, but the man's hand shot out, grabbing my arm. His grip was strong, stronger than I expected, and it stopped me in my tracks. "You've done enough," he said again. "Let her go." I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, his knuckles whitening. I glanced at the boy, hoping for some kind of support, but he was staring down at his feet, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "Why?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Why are you doing this? What are you hiding?" The man didn't answer. He just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Meanwhile, the woman had begun whispering. Her voice was soft, almost inaudible, but it was rhythmic, repetitive, like she was reciting something. I couldn't make out the words, but the sound made my skin crawl. "Stop," I said, my voice breaking. "You need to stop." "She's ours," the man said simply. "She always has been." I opened my mouth to argue, to shout, but that's when I heard it. A sound from the prep room. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. My blood ran cold. My eyes darted toward the room, but I couldn't bring myself to step forward. "She's crying," the boy said quietly, his voice trembling. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, she can't. She can't be..." The woman straightened suddenly, her whispers cutting off mid-sentence. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, and she turned to look at the man, her expression strained. "It's time," she said, her voice tight with urgency. The man released my arm and nodded, striding past me toward the prep room. I tried to block his path, but he didn't even acknowledge me. He moved to the table and began unfastening the stretcher. The boy followed silently, his shoulders hunched, his movements hesitant. "Wait!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "You can't just..." The man turned back to me, his expression hardening. "Walk away," he said. "You've done enough. Consider yourself lucky I won't tell you again." I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to stop them, to fight back, but my feet wouldn't move. My chest tightened as I watched them lift the stretcher, carrying her body toward the door. As they passed, the woman paused for just a moment, turning to me. Her lips quivered, as though she wanted to speak, and for a split second I thought I saw tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for following the rules. Most people don't." And then they were gone, the sound of their footsteps fading into the night. I stood there, frozen, staring at the empty prep room. The candles still flickered on the counter, their flames casting shadows across the walls. My mind raced with questions, but I knew I wouldn't get answers. I heard the rumble of the funeral car's engine outside, followed by the sound of tires crunching against the gravel lot. And then silence. I didn't move for a long time. The prep room felt wrong now, empty but still suffocating. The candles were burning lower, their light trembling as if the air itself were unsteady. My eyes kept drifting back to the table, to the faint impression her body had left in the blanket. I should have felt relieved they were gone, but I didn't. All I felt was dread. The silence pressed in around me, broken only by the hum of the ventilation system. The police should have arrived by now, but the minutes dragged on and there were no sirens, no flashing lights. I checked my phone to make sure I hadn't missed a call. Nothing. It felt like I'd been erased. Weeks went by before I saw that car again, the hearse the family had arrived in. I was home. It was late, and I'd been trying to distract myself with the TV, flipping through channels without really watching. My living room was dim, lit only by the flashes of the screen. The quiet was worse than the noise. Then I noticed the glow of headlights spilling through the curtains. It wasn't fast, like someone passing by. It was slow, intentional. I stopped dead, the remote slipping from my hand. My breath caught as I got up and walked to the window. I pulled the curtain back just enough to peek outside. The car was parked across the street. It was the same car. The old funeral car with its peeling black paint and tinted windows. My stomach knotted as I stared at it, my hands shaking. There was someone in the back seat. I couldn't see clearly, just the subtle outline of a figure against the dark glass. I stood there, motionless, watching, waiting for something to happen. The figure shifted slightly, leaning forward into the faint light spilling through the window. It was her. I drew in a shallow breath. Her face was pale, her eyes dull, and her head tilted slightly to one side, like she was trying to get a better look at me. But she didn't move beyond that. I dropped the curtain and stepped back. Fear ran through me. My mind raced with 1,000 explanations, none of them good. I stayed up all night, staring at the front door, waiting for the knock that never came. The next time I saw the car, it was in the funeral home parking lot. I'd locked up for the night, the lot empty except for my car at the far end, or at least it should have been empty. The funeral car was parked just under the glow of the street lamp, its black paint gleaming softly in the light. It didn't belong there. I stood in the doorway, staring at it, my keys cold in my hand. It was the same car, the same peeling paint, the same curtains barely visible through the tinted glass, and her. She was sitting in the back seat again, her outline subtle yet undeniable, her head tilted, her hollow gaze fixed on the building, on me. I wanted to move, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. My mind screamed at me to leave, to get in my car and drive, but I couldn't. Is this some kind of threat? The car's headlights flared on suddenly, flooding the lot with blinding white. I stumbled back, blinking, and when my vision cleared, the car was gone. There was no sound. No engine, no tires, no crunch of gravel, just empty space where it had been. I haven't told anyone what happened. The police never showed, and I didn't follow up. What would I even say? That a dead woman sat outside my house in a funeral car? That her family had taken her away before I could stop them? Sometimes I convince myself it's over, that it's done. But late at night, when the house is quiet, I'll catch myself staring out the window, waiting for headlights that never come. And in those moments, I swear I can feel her eyes on me. Not seeing her is almost worse than when I did. Because I know she's still out there. No, not just her. They're out there. And they know exactly where I am.